We're talking to Eric
Solid
Monticelli.
start to the day.
I was told to do this when pronouncing your name.
that helps a lot.
You're communications director over at Infinity Ward, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. So you're here to tell us a little bit about Infinite Warfare.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question right out of the gate.
Yeah.
How many times do people say Infinity Warfare or Infinite War
Yeah.
now? Because
Yeah.
I have to really concentrate when I'm saying it.
It is a hard sort of, juxtaposition to say those two things, but the title has layers of meaning, so we're pretty happy with it.
Does it have layers of meaning with the name of the company as well, or is that just...
That's coincidental.
Okay.
The real premise behind the title and why we went into that was that, this whole concept of war is just, it's ever present and never changes sort of
Right.
thing. So there's infinite there, but also, think about the vastness of space. We don't know how big that is. It's pretty infinite, so.
Right.
Layers of meaning.
And then we had some questions already, but I just want to let you know we're going to be taking your questions. If you have any questions about Infinite Warfare from Infinity Ward, just be sure to tweet us with the hashtag RTE3. It's right there at the bottom of your screen over that direction, and we will ask Eric your questions. So you had a big reveal at the Sony press conference. I want to point out something that confused me as well, and I think it confused a lot of people. Luckily, it's been cleared up that it's not the case, where the way Sony presented it was they did a whole section of their VR games, and then from that went straight into Infinite Warfare's gameplay. And I don't think that they delineated between the VR part and then the Infinite Warfare. So some people are going, wow, is there going to be a VR component to Infinite Warfare?
Yeah, I mean, it was completely coincidental. It was just sort of where we were in the presentation. To clear that up, we're making Call of Duty, and it's going to be out on PS4 and Xbox One and PC. So, no VR plans right now.
That's great. Well, so space is going to be the main focus now, right?
Yeah.
For Infinite Warfare. I'm constantly trying to make sure I don't say it wrong too. How do you feel that's going to change the gameplay? Is it going to be...
Well, I hope everybody noticed in the video we put out that a lot of the gameplay you can get into now. You can get into your Jackal space fighter, so you're actually going to be flying through space. You're going to be engaged in these epic space battles. You're also going to be engaged in some zero-G combat. It adds some new elements to the game. Like traditionally, Call of Duty, you look for cover on the ground. It's almost like a linear, not linear per se, but you're looking in certain planes. Now with space, you got to even look up. You got to look all around. It's almost like 360 coverage of where you could have bullets whizzing at you from anywhere.
Sounds like almost very Ender's Game-ish.
Yeah, I guess.
So how far into the space fighter combat is it going to go? Are we talking something more like full-on descent free space, or is it going to be more of a toned-down kind of experience?
So the whole purpose of having the Jackal in the game was to create this sort of continuous gameplay loop. So we want this experience where players can get onto their hub ship, which we're calling the Retribution. You go on the hub ship, you select your mission, like you saw on the ops map in our gameplay. Actually, it's right now. It's good timing. So, you click on your mission in the ops map, you hit go, you're going to launch into your Jackal space fighter, launch out into combat, sort of get to your destination. It could be a number of things. You could be breaching a ship, you could be trying to land on another planet, you could be doing whatever you need to do to fulfill that mission. Complete the mission and then exfil out on your Jackal. And we want to create that sort of loop that players can go through. So there's going to be a lot of depth to it. And so when you get out into space combat, anything you see sort of in the plane of space, you can get to. So if there's a ship, you can sort of fly to that ship. You can't orbit a planet. You can't do a circle around a planet. But there's going to be a lot of movement with that space combat.
I love this section that we're watching right here. This was one of my favorite parts of the presentation. Just the environment, the world, walking through this launch bay. It's so gritty and so dirty. I just absolutely loved it.
Yeah, the aesthetic we went for, and I love saying this, and it's one of the coolest things I learned when I joined the company, is that it was rust, blood, and diesel. That's what we were looking for. Our narrative director and the writer on the game, Taylor Kurosaki and Brian Bloom, they actually went on to, they did an embark on a U.S. Navy carrier, huge carrier. They did a launch on the carrier. They slept overnight. They got to see what it was like to live and breathe and be on these massive, massive warships. And essentially, if you think about space, it's sort of like the ocean in the sky, right? So translating a warship, putting it into the sky, have these flying warships, but we also wanted to keep that really grounded in reality. So everything you see on the Retribution is influenced by lessons we learned from talking with the military in multiple ways.
You know, it's one of the things, too, that I think differentiates Infinity Ward as a studio is everything I've always read about the behind the scenes from the Call of Duty franchise. It talks about the research that you put into it, you know, going out, firing the weapons, modeling the weapons, making sure everything's accurate, which I think is one of the major reasons it became such a dominating franchise. What is it like when you then go to a sci-fi themed iteration of the game? You don't really have those things, so do you just go to places where you can get close to experience and then fill the rest in narratively?
Well, we kept it as grounded and as real as possible. I mean, we don't consider this sci-fi at all. It's a very plausible, real future that we're heading to. You know, we wanted to sort of ground the story in things that are being researched nowadays. So one of the things I constantly get asked is like, you know, there's no sound in space, right? And I was like, yeah, we know there's no sound in space.
But you don't want to play that game.
No,
yeah,
it's
I
boring.
mean, it's would make that kind of boring. So, you know, there's been a lot of research into sort of these devices that, you know, through transducers or sensors or something would create sound effects in a helmet. And that's sort of the fiction we have in our game. So when you have your helmet on, the sound effects of explosions, bullets, like the rush of things you normally hear in everyday life are created by these sort of like fictional elements in the helmet, this technology. And that was all inspired by real world tech.
You know, it's one of those things, too, because that's even for movies as well that are set in space. You know, there's sound in movies, so they add that in because it adds to the experience of watching it or, you know, in this case, playing it. And people always point out, it's like, yeah, there's no sound in space. Like, yeah, we all know that, but you don't actually know what it's like to be in space. I don't know what it's like to be in space and be in a soundless environment. Your brain, like, there's feedback from guns and everything. You know, your brain can fill in a lot of that as well. It's like, so it's like an experiential thing versus an actual physics, you know, thing as well.
Yeah.
I like the way you guys have approached it, though. It's like humans need that feedback, and so you've provided that feedback through the fiction of the universe.
Yeah, and I mean, even as a human, if you touch something, sometimes it triggers other senses too. So it's like that synesthetic effect. So firing a gun could trigger some sort of you know, sound in your brain too. But like having this technology there that sort of amplifies that it's human. It's very human.
And so, and I'm actually really glad to hear you, you know, say that specifically that you all don't consider it sci-fi, because I guess I fall into the trap that a lot of people do is I see space, and as soon as I see space,
Yeah.
I immediately think sci-fi.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to make a Call of Duty grounded military shooter, and we feel like we've done that. We've taken a lot of lessons from past Call of Duties, and then you know, the creative team on this has done a ton of research. They're huge fans of the military genre, and we want to just bring that and infuse that into this new setting, this space setting. You know, and there's a lot of action, and in most of the game, you're on the ground. It's not always Earth you're on the ground, but it might be some other, like a rogue asteroid spinning out of control, or maybe like a moon of Saturn, Titan, or something like that. We've mentioned a few of these locations you go to, but it'll feel very much like a Call of Duty game, very grounded, very, you know, it's going to be a warfare game.
I do appreciate that. As much of the advanced science that you've incorporated in the game, you also have your weaponry tends to still feel very familiar, very like modern weapons that we have today, and so it really ties it in with the feel of the previous Call of Duty games. Did you have to? Is there a good mix of more future feeling weapons with classical weapons, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, we created this sort of whole menagerie of fictional weapons manufacturers, but in a way that, you know, they make ballistic weapons primarily, but in the future we might be able to modify those, have the, you know, we're showing some of them in here, actually, the cool sights you have and things like that. The grappling hook is sort of a new element that we added to the game, too. And even on the show floor at E3, we have another thing we're showing that has really, really cool looking weapons in it too, that sort of can almost be transformed into, like, from a ballistic to an energy weapon and back.
Got a good question here from Twitter.
Cool.
Almighty86 asks, what kind of movement is in multiplayer? Is it going to be this new movement feature where you can get shot from full 360
Because
degrees?
multiplayer, obviously, I mean, this is,
Sure.
people are fanatical about
Right.
Call of Duty multiplayer. It's highly competitive on a professional level as well. It's like, so your approach to it is like, people are going to heavily scrutinize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now, you know, the multiplayer guys would absolutely murder me if I said too much
okay.
about it.
Okay, sure.
I can say that we're going to be talking about it in September, and we have already put out there that, you know, our movement system universally in the game is going to be very fluid, very familiar to players that have played. We're emphasizing frontline engagements, so you'll see it'll be familiar. I don't want to go too far into it.
Now, in the moment, of course, we even mentioned multiplayer. because it's E3, and
Everything.
people immediately start asking about
Yeah.
betas or an opportunity. When
Sure.
can they get their hands on playing multiplayer or anything like that?
September. Let's
Okay.
talk about it
September.
then.
We'll talk about it all in September. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, sort of single player. Is there maybe potential for co-op? There was a lot of that in Black Ops 3.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a co-op mode we're doing already. We in our reveal, we talked about that this is the first time ever Infinity Ward is going to make a zombies mode.
Right.
So we're really happy. We're really stoked. We got a great team working on that. You know, a lot of the guys that worked on it are steeped in this sort of like pop culture background. There's some of the old guys from Neversoft that came and joined the team that you know, worked on Tony Hawk and Guitar Hero and that sort of stuff. So they got some really cool stuff they're bringing to the forefront.
Yeah, and that was a question that was asked by Jackson Latner on Twitter. That was the main question he had was, anything you can tell about the zombie mode at all?
Oh yeah. You know, the craziest thing too is we put out this reveal stream. We put out this image, and it, you know, it was really cool. And I've read a lot about how people think about it and what they think it is. Nobody's quite got it right yet. They really got to zoom into that and pick it out and like dissect it. I want to see somebody fully dissect that image. We put a lot in there, and there's a lot of little Easter eggs. So hopefully people can keep going back and check it out.
Well, you mentioned that in the single-player campaign, there you kind of you go to the hub ship and then you can select your missions.
Yes.
How flexible is the progression of the story? Is it?
So the story we're trying to tell is a linear story. It's the story of Captain Reyes. So Nick Reyes is essentially on this progression from a grunt to a leader. You know, we thought that was a very compelling thematic content for the narrative, and you're going to play through that story. But at the same time, what we showed on the Sony stage is actually a side mission. We're going to show it's a ship assault, and so you can select these optional side missions every once in a while throughout the campaign.
Great.
A lot of questions on Twitter also, specifically one from Tyler Brewer.
Okay.
Wants to know, can you tell us anything about Kit Harington's character in the game?
He is the face of the enemy. I can say that much. He did a really phenomenal job. You know, it's amazing, and I don't want to go too much into it. We're going to be talking about it pretty soon here, but we recorded him, and it's going to be killer to have him in the game.
So aside from the grappling hook, is there any new movement tweaks that we'll see? Kind of, well, you got the grappling hook, you've got it's now being able to get in a space fighter.
Are y'all calling it the grappling hook? Is that the term that you're using for it?
loosely.
Right now.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
We'll see if we come up with a cool name. Yeah, I mean, they're not so much. You know, the grappling hook is meant to sort of aid you in zero-G combat. We thought it was a cool way to get to cover. You know, like 'cause
Sure.
there's a lot of different things you have to do there. As far as other movement, you know, it's very boots on the ground. We have a lot of things that you're going to go through. And when you're in space, too, you notice that some of the soldiers have thrusters. They have RCS thrusters on their backpack that help them do movement. But it's still going to feel very familiar, very similar to past Call of Duty games.
And for people who don't get to attend E3, what is your presence like on the floor, and what are y'all doing over there?
We're actually we're in the PlayStation booth, and we have a theater demo we're showing there. It's rad. We are hearing some really good feedback from it, so you're going to hear a lot of stories about it coming out of E3, and maybe someday we'll release it. We're not sure exactly when.
I'm hoping to get over there, but I've seen the lines.
Yeah, you got to come over, man.
Yeah, so I'd love to come over like maybe early tomorrow on the last day.
Okay.
Last day calms down just a little
That's
bit.
true, it
Yeah,
does,
but right
yeah.
now it's mayhem over there.
It is. It's crazy, man.
Let's see. The real Royco. There we go. I think I said it. Wants to know, so how much of Infinite Warfare takes place on planets? Is there a percentage?
Joel
or
had
a
that same
number of
question too. Joel was
planet-specific
curious, can you
missions?
talk about how much happens around Earth?
Yeah, I mean, it's we don't have a set percentage per se. There's a lot of action that's on, you know, like what we're showing over at the PlayStation booth is actually set. It's our Black Sky level set in Geneva, Switzerland. So we have a lot of action that happens throughout the game on different locations. But you know, the balance of it, we're still trying to tweak depending on how the side missions go and that. So there's not really a percentage I can say, but it's going to be a lot of boots on the ground. There's, you know, space is definitely a big part of it, but boots on the ground is huge.
I get the impression from that there will be a lot of different variations in gravity as well that have to be accounted for in various gameplays.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have zero G, and we definitely have, you know, normal gravity and that sort of thing. But you know, our intention is to make a traditional Call of Duty game. So we're making a shooter that has grounded and is fully, you know, something people are going to be familiar with.
Well, we have a special treat. We have the narrative director of the game, Taylor Kurosaki, joining us. Hey, very nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. So we were kind of curious. We wanted to ask you some questions about the narrative for the game. It's like you have a history of in narrative content, correct?
Sure.
Is that what's your approach when you're making something that's a narrative story where the protagonist is the player versus someone who's just passively watching, for lack of a better term? Is it a different set of challenges?
Well, absolutely. The first challenge, the first and foremost challenge, is to have our players feel at parity, Parity, with our protagonist. You have to believe the actions that he's taking. You have to believe in the decisions he's making, and you have to feel like those are the decisions that you would make yourself. So that's our first goal.
And before you joined us, I mean, I fell into the trap where I was referring to the game as sci-fi. You know, I saw space and immediately associated sci-fi. And Eric was very quick to correct me, saying, we're not approaching this like science fiction. It's our interpretation of what the near future is like, you know, the real future that we're headed towards. And like, what was the approach there?
Yeah, I mean, we're telling a war story. That's first and foremost. We're telling a story in the genre of war, which is a really rich genre, a lot of great movies, a lot of great books. TV shows have gone in there, and we're trying to honor that tradition. So the setting, although incredible and fantastical and allows us to do incredible gameplay things that we couldn't do differently, we couldn't do before, the story is truly about a soldier who has been field promoted on the worst possible day to stave off an incredible invasion.
I mean, just even saying a field promotion, that carries a lot with it as well. Like, something has gone... It's been a hard day, probably.
Things have gone not according to plan.
There we go.
Yeah, and that's the pressure that we're putting on these characters, and we're trying to see how they respond to that pressure under these incredible circumstances, and what that reveals about their characters.
How do you feel the intensity of the story in this one stacks up to, like, say, Ghosts or Modern Warfare series?
I mean, those are so different, you know. I mean, if you want to talk about Modern Warfare, which we're talking about because we're releasing the remaster, I mean, that did some incredible things for truly putting you in the shoes of a soldier, and a story that was believable and memorable, and we're trying to honor that tradition and carry that forward. We want this story to be right up there with things like Gates of Fire, which is a Stephen Pressfield novel, or Black Hawk Down, or Saving Private Ryan. I mean, that's the kind of story we're trying to tell just in this new setting.
Not only one of the most popular franchises, but also one of the longest running franchises in the history of video games. And I think a challenge, especially narratively, with games is that if you're a very popular game, you can go one of two directions. You can either, you know, try to deliver exactly the experience that people have had in the past, and over time you run the risk of becoming stale, or you run the risk of trying new things, taking a risk in that direction, and people like saying, oh, it's not what I, you know, remembered, or something like that. How do you guys balance that? Well,
I mean, I know for me and for the rest of the guys at Infinity Ward, the goal was always make the game that you want to play.
Love it.
Make the game that speaks to you and is in your heart. And I know that for everyone at the studio, this was truly a passion for us. And we let our own instincts and our own sensibilities be our guide. And we're really, really excited to finally get to show some gameplay and show some of it to the fans. And we're excited to keep showing more, and ultimately excited for people to play it.
You know, sometimes it's hard to remind yourself that the video games industry, while it's maturing and it has quite a bit, still a very young industry. So the generation of artists that are working on games now, this is the first generation of people who grew up with video games themselves that are now making games. And so, you know, an Infinity Ward obviously draws some of the top talent in the entire industry. So it's great to hear that people are passionate in making the games that they want to play. That's our approach when we make content for online is, you know, make what you'd want to watch is what we always say.
Exactly. You can't try to anticipate what you think other people will like. You have to work from your gut and work from your sort of artistic core, and hope that you're on the mark. And so far, I think we've done okay. So we're going to keep doing that.
With since Call of Duty franchise is now multiple developer, do you feel any kind of pressure to keep things sort of tied to things that have come before? Like, is there any expectation that we'd see things like the bionic powers we saw in Black Ops 3, or is there any bleed over between the franchises?
You know, I think that you always just want to make the sort of game that your studio is making, and we are all very, you know, as Taylor mentioned, we're very passionate about what we're making, and consistency in terms of like keeping names across some of the things, so, you know, certain things that people are familiar with, that's important to a certain level. But yeah, we talk to all the other studios. We work really close with them. Raven's actually developing Modern Warfare Remastered, and we're executive producing it. So we have a really good energy and a really good communication channel with everybody, and we keep on the same page. And we just want to make sure that if you pick up a Call of Duty game, it's a Call of Duty game, and it is exactly what you would expect from the brand.
I mean, ultimately, it seems like the biggest conversation is the two-way communication with the audience and the ravenous fans all over the world that play Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Call of Duty actually has a really interesting history in our company. Our first show that we did was based on another franchise, Halo. So we kind of noticed people who played Halo. But the part of the company which is wildly popular, Ryan works for, our gameplay group, Achievement Hunter, it actually started with Call of Duty. We did an achievement race. Jeff and I did in Call of Duty, trying to get all 100 or 1,000 points in one of the Call of Duty titles, and that's how we launched the whole thing. So has
awesome.
a very important part in our company's history as well.
Yeah, we like to think of Call of Duty as its own genre.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a franchise. It's really a genre. It's that big now, and we just want to make something that fits with that and does that tradition proud.
And how do you guys, it's obviously a huge franchise like this. It's like, a marquee player at something like the Sony press conference. As new technologies, Xbox announced Project Scorpio. Sony's been talking a lot about VR as well. Do you guys want to jump into that stuff or take more time and look at it?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a little while to just sort of, as these new technologies come online and you get up to speed with them, and that's one of the greatest things about the gaming industry is that we're always pushing ahead, we're always pushing forward. So, in terms of that, they're always interesting and intriguing to look at, but you just got to develop the best thing that, for the equipment and the sort of consoles out there right now. We did announce at COD XP that we're going to have a VR experience for the Jackal, actually, the space fighter. So, we have a team at the studio now that's working on that and dabbling in it, but it's not related to the game. It's sort of its own little event for COD XP, so that's kind of cool.
I'm actually a big fan of vehicle-based VR experiences, because not everybody has the space to jump around in their living room, you know what I mean, and do things. It's nice to have that environment where you can look around and follow vehicles as they pass you and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like an amusement park or something.
Yeah.
Totally.
You mentioned you couldn't really tell us much about the multiplayer for Infinite Warfare, but can you tell us anything about Modern Warfare Remastered? Is there going to be any multiplayer component to that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've announced that we're launching with 10 multiplayer maps. Some of the favorites, Crash, Backlot, Bog, are coming back. So, we'll have a lot more information about that as it rolls out, but the multiplayer will be there.
Little bit of a cheeky question, but somebody wanted to know: can you have a dog, a space dog?
There's dog fighting.
Is there? Oh, there we go, dog fighting. There we go. I love it. That's it. That's the new Call of Duty dog.
Yeah, we heard about Riley the cyber dog. That was one of the first questions we got when we announced, and it's like that's. Yeah, no.
Little jetpack, grappling hook. It'd be fun. It's kind of like a leash in a way, like grappling hook in kind of a way. All right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone is super excited about Infinite Warfare. In the meantime, where can they go to stay up to date on information about the title?
You can follow us at Infinity Ward on Twitter, our Facebook page, and of course CallOfDuty.com, and then all the Call of Duty social channels as well.
Great, and of course we'll continue our coverage of Infinite Warfare as it approaches its release on our informational channel, The Know. You can subscribe to that at youtube.com/know. Gentlemen, thank you once again. Now let's kick it over to Joel and Adam.